The freedom of assembly and association is the right to hold meetings, to meet together, both publicly and privately, and to discuss problems and to plan actions. What is the freedom of assembly and association? The freedom of assembly includes the right to participate in peaceful assembly, for example, to demonstrate and organize opinion meetings. According to the European Court of Human Rights, freedom of assembly extends to both private gatherings and meetings in public places. In Article 21 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, it states that no restrictions may be placed on the exercise of this right other than those who imposed in conformity with the law and which are necessary in a democratic society. The freedom of association applies to different types of associations and includes the right of everyone to form and join trade unions for the protection of their interests. In Article 22 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, it states that everyone shall have the right to freedom of association with others, including the right to form and trade unions for the protection of his interests. It also states that no restrictions may be placed on the exercise of this right other than those which are prescribed by law and which are necessary in a democratic society. How the ladies in white's freedom of assembly and association have been oppressed. The ladies in whites, or Damas de Blanco, are a collective mothers, sisters, daughters, and wives of political prisoners. While Raul Castro continues to deny the existence of prisoners of conscience in Cuba, the ladies in white carry their pictures with them in a public march every week, insisting they are not forgotten. The group was founded in 2003 by Laura Paulin, a schoolteacher whose husband Hector Mesada suffered a politically motivated arrest as part of a larger crackdown on anti-communist dissidents known as the Black Spring of 2003. Mesada endured 8 years in prison, released only as a part of international diplomatic deal involving the Catholic Church. On June 26, 2017, over 30 members of the Ladies in White were violently arrested over the weekend for attempting to attend Sunday Mass. The leader, Berta Soler, was apprehended by 5 uniformed Cuban police. They took her sign away violently and dragged her into a car, Artili said. Then a mob began to yell obscenities at us, calling us counter-revolutionaries, maggots, and shouting, "This street belongs to Fidel." Maggot is a slur communists use for Cuban exiles. The Ladies in White protest the government in the same way every Sunday, by dressing in white and silently carrying ladrillos and a photo of their imprisoned loved ones from their homes to Santa Rita Church, where they attend Mass. On March 20th, 2016, just before President Obama's visit to Cuba, about 300 government backers surrounded about 50 members and backers of the Ladies in Whites as they led a peaceful march after attending a Mass. The women were taken into custody by female police officers and loaded onto buses in an operation that lasted about 10 minutes. In such cases, protesters are typically detained for a few hours and then released. The number of protesters, counter-protesters, and police appeared to be about the same as in past incidents, which take place in the Cuban capital each Sunday after the ladies attend Catholic Mass, marching silently along Fifth Avenue and joining other dissidents to try to march into a residential neighborhood. The Ladies in White's constant detainment and oppression following their peaceful protests for their family members' liberation is a violation of the freedom of association and assembly because the women are oppressed for exercising their right to form groups. The consequence of this freedom's absence on the community of Havana is that those in society spend their whole life in fear because they see that those who stand up for their rights are thrown in jail. They witness how their community members are oppressed and treated brutally, so they will be deterred from standing up for the rights of their loved ones and will continue to live in an unjust society.
Freedom of speech means that someone's right to say something is protected within certain limits. A person may have to suffer consequences for saying some things, but they still have the right to say them. Freedom of speech includes non-speech also. What someone wears and how they behave is considered freedom of expression, and is a protected right as well. All people are also given the right to peacefully support or go against another person's beliefs. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has canceled talks by 3 of its scientists speaking on the rising issue of global warming. Environmentalists see these actions as a push to silence climate change, debate, and discussion. Scott Pruitt, the head of the EPA, appointed by President Donald Trump in February of 2017, made claims as to his beliefs on the cause of climate change, yet deleted the state information sources regarding the matter. EPA scientists' commitments to speak at conferences regarding climate change were canceled with no explanation from the government officials. Critics view the government's failure to provide Americans with proper information as a move to downplay the threat of a man-made climate change. Since Pruitt took charge of the EPA, the agent's branding and website have excluded the voices and ideas of scientists focused on the issues of climate change. Some 15 mentions of climate change have also been removed from the main page of the website. However, Pruitt is not the only leading cause behind this oppression. The Trump administration as a whole did the same by weakening committees that provide the government with scientific advice, making it more difficult for scientists speaking public on these issues, working to block public access to scientific data, revoking scientific-based safeguards, and creating hostile environments for scientific staff. Trump administration representatives refused to respond to or comment on this report. The government's actions on silencing scientists' right to express their thoughts and comments on global issues is a direct act of taking away their right to speech. The scientists have the constitutional right to publicly provide the information they find and help Americans become better informed citizens. However, with the government's actions, their inability to speak on their issues has been taken away. The consequences of the restriction of freedom of speech in this situation is the lack of knowledge that the American people are being given. The government's actions of veiling information and silencing government scientists and keeping information from U.S. citizens that they have the right to know is a direct violation of the freedom of speech.
The right to privacy. Our right to privacy, which includes all those things that are part of us and what we choose to share both publicly and privately. What is the right to privacy? The Privacy and Human Rights International Studies of Privacy Laws and Practice, written predominantly by David Bannister and Simon Davies, explain the 4 types of privacy. 1. Informational privacy, how the government handles private information like credit cards. 2. Bodily privacy, protection of people's physical being from invasive screening or procedures. 3. Privacy of communications, security over modern forms of communication. 4. Territorial privacy, intrusion limits on private and government-owned property. The right to privacy supports human dignity and other key human values such as freedom of speech. There is an explicit recognition of the right to privacy in almost every country's constitution. Comprehensive privacy laws provide a framework for human protection. 3 important trends that invade privacy are globalization, which removes geographical limits of the spread of information; convergence, which eliminates technological barriers between systems; and multimedia, which is an easy translation of data that is fused between different systems. How U.S. citizens' right to privacy has been invaded by the use of drones. Drone use in the U.S. has been increasingly controversial as a topic over the past decade, as it has become a key resource for military, government, and leisure activity. In a response to this controversial topic, U.S. citizens have become split over the use of drones. Many are now opposed to the U.S. use of drones because of their access to film over private property, while drone supporters argue that there are legitimate reasons for the continued production of drones. Consumer Electrics Association stated that over 700,000 drones will be sold in the United States this year alone, mainly by large companies like Intel. An example of an invasion of privacy by drone use was William Meredith, who felt that his privacy on a territorial level was invaded by the use of a drone. In 2015, he believed that a drone flying over his property in Kentucky was spying on his daughter who was sunbathing in their backyard. In reaction, he shot down the drone with a privately owned rifle. He was arrested for
endangerment, and criminal mischief, but declared innocent by Rebecca Ward, with evidence of invasion of human privacy and 2 human witnesses. Drone privacy laws are handled on a predominantly state-level basis, but Supreme Court has put drone restrictions for both professional and leisurely bases. Freedom of conscience and religion, the freedom of beliefs, values, and mind. What is the freedom of conscience and religion? It can be defined as the right to choose and practice a religion of choice without the interference of government. As the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights stated in Article 10, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change religion or belief in freedom, either alone or in a community with others, in public and private settings, to manifest religion or belief in worship, teaching, practices, and observance. All persons have the right to think freely and have their own ideas and religious beliefs. As the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution states, everyone in the United States has the right to practice his or her own religion, or no religion at all. The separation of church and state in the U.S. has avoided conflict in the government that many nations around the world have experienced. The government is not able to penalize religious beliefs and has deemed it unconstitutional to teach religions in schools. How China has restricted Muslims from practicing Islam, oppressing Muslims in their religion. The Muslim community of Xinjiang has been banned by the Chinese government to spread Muslim to the youth through parenting or teaching. China has introduced a ban on the spread of Islam religion to children. It applies to the Chinese Muslim region of Xinjiang. Those found encouraging children into religious activities will be reported. China has also introduced a new ban of growing beards and wearing head covers for women. The people of Xinjiang community feel that they are being denied their human rights by restricting their ability to practice their religion. They also believe that they are being denied fair economic opportunities due to their restrictions. An example of this direct oppression was that in the year 2014 in April, the Global Times reported that its officials in Xinjiang offered rewards up to $7,000 for those who tipped off police with information regarding the Islam people who did things like grow facial hair or wear women head covers. Due to all these restrictions, the Muslim people in these Chinese communities do not feel that they have their basic human right of freedom of religion met.
The right to petition the government. The First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The First Amendment protects spirit of belief, emotion, and reason, and of political activity against intrusion by the government. In Afghanistan, women can be jailed for the crime of fleeing an abusive husband. While the Taliban rule has ended in Afghanistan, members of the clan are still present in the country. Taliban's rise to power made women feel marginalized and discriminated against. Their rights, such as education, healthcare facilities, and the chances of employment, were extremely low to none. According to the New York Times, less than 1% of humans in the workforce in Afghanistan are women. This leads to the lack of gender inequality and lack of economic opportunity and human development. The lack of women's employment affected boys' education, and the mortality rates of infants was extremely high because of the poor health conditions and malnutrition. One major consequence of women being unable to share their experiences of sexual assault with the police makes many to almost every girl not be able to go to school. Not having any other method of transportation, girls have to walk to school. Many get sexually assaulted on the way to school and taken from their home and family. The risk that women take on their way to school is not worth their education. One major consequence of women being unable to share their experiences of sexual assault with the police makes many to almost every girl not be able to go to school. The number of women in the cabinet in Afghanistan have decreased greatly in the past years. Many felt that the state could not or would not protect them. According to the Human Rights Watch, a recent study has shown that 70 to 80% of the marriages in Afghanistan are forced, and 5 to 7% of all marriages are under the age of 16. There is a correlation between domestic violence and forced marriages. These early and forced marriages contribute to girls dropping out of school, and complications during childbirth cause health complications or maternal death. Afghanistan has the second highest rate of maternal mortality in the world.
The right to fair trial and due process. The basis for equality in the justice system. Due process balances the power of the law and individuals' right to fair treatment based on their innate dignity. When a government harms a person without following the exact course of the law, this constitutes a due process violation. The right to fair trial defined by the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment of the United States of America states, "In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and case of the accusation, to be confronted with the witness against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense." An oppression in fair trial and due process is racism. Racism in the judicial and law enforcement system. The University of Dayton states that every woman, man, youth, and child has the human right to freedom from discrimination based on race, color, descent, or national or ethnic origin, and to other fundamental human rights depend upon realization of the human right to freedom from racial discrimination. Facts about racism in law enforcement. In Kansas, if you are under the age of 25, you have a 28% chance of getting pulled over if you are black, whereas white people only have a 12% chance. Once stopped in a traffic violation, 3 times as many black and Hispanic drivers were searched as white drivers, according to the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics. The National Academy of Sciences stated that, after conviction, blacks are more likely than whites to receive longer sentences. Finally, the Bureau of Justice Statistics reports 208,000 people are in state prisons for drug offenses. Of this number, 32% are white and 68% are African American or Hispanic. A consequence from racism in the judicial and law enforcement system is protest. St. Louis had a protest last year after Jason Stockley, a white police officer, was found not guilty for the killing of Anthony Lamar Smith, a 24-year-old African American. This event happened in 2011, but he was only tried last year. Anthony Lamar Smith was not given a fair trial after being stopped in a car chase and was shot dead before questioning. It was told to a jury that the officer acted in self-defense, claiming that the driver had a gun. Upon DNA testing, the officer was the only fingerprints on the gun in the car, making an argument that Jason Stockley had planted the weapon, framing Smith. On body cam footage also found, the officer said that he was going to kill this man before he had even stopped him. Many people rallied to protest against police endlessly killing innocent black people. This is unlawful of our nation's judicial system and law enforcement.